Excited to be here. Ed having us back for a second year. Working with my buddy Jeffrey Decoux here on the end. Jeffrey, welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, Jeffrey has assembled an incredible lineup here to talk about venture capital and Texas and infrastructure. So it's going to be pretty fast paced to keep us on schedule. So Jeffrey, you want to say a few words here?
Well, yeah. So we're here to talk about what we call Continuum of Captial. It sounds really complicated, but it's purely putting in the concept of taking infrastructure investors, combining them with innovation investors in the state of Texas. And that is to establish Texas as a leader in venture capital. Right now, you're going to hear from a gentleman coming up shortly about where we rank on venture capital, but where Texas should rank. And it's leadership that individuals like Dan with Texas Capital is going to help pioneer and put us in the lead. The first interview we wanted to start with is just putting on the spot Dan, talking about in the incredible news of last week where they launched the first state ETF. And no better person to talk about what the state ETF is than Dan.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, welcome, Dan.
All right, thank you.
WTF ETF. What do we got? What's
right.
going on?
So let me give you a quick background on Texas Capital. Texas Capital is a Texas bank that was founded to serve Texas businesses. So in the continuum of capital, we do some of the very basic things like you need a checking account, savings account, you need to run payroll. We do that very well. All the way through, we have the only full service sales and trading floor. We're the only place in Texas that can give you access to Wall Street. But the big news last week, we had Governor Abbott at the New York Stock Exchange, which you'd think that entrepreneurialism is hard. Try to get Governor Abbott to New York City. He went and rang the bell in order to celebrate the launch of the Texas Capital Texas Equity Index, which is the only state ETF that invests in companies that are exclusively headquartered in Texas. The ETF itself is weighted first by GDP, so it's designed to represent the state of Texas, not just the companies that are public here. There are currently 221 companies that are part of the index. Fully 10% of all companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange are headquartered in the state of Texas, which to me is a staggering statistic. It speaks to our relevance. Frighteningly, there are about 34 country-based ETFs of countries that are smaller than Texas. The country of Malaysia has its own ETF. Its GDP is about 40% smaller than DFW on a standalone basis. So we think it's high time that people had an opportunity to very easily invest in the world's 9th largest economy. Governor Abbott is now the only governor that can offer index inclusion. If you move your business to Texas, people will invest in your stock, and that person is now the fund that is Texas Capital. And so we were very happy to be on the forefront of bringing Wall Street to the state of Texas.
That's fascinating. So yeah, as an economic development tool, I didn't think of that. Yeah, he can use that as kind of a carrot. Come here, you get the tax breaks for being in Texas, and also the potential to get in this fund, which then can drive investment to the company itself through the fund. That's fantastic. I'm based in Austin. I've been wanting an Austin-based ETF fund. I feel like that'd be a good investment, especially over the last couple of years. But Texas is the same trajectory. So I would think, you look at the teachers' funds, all the other people, would be a pretty good place to put some money.
Yeah. Well, and the really interesting thing is that the amount of outperformance. So the fund itself outperforms the Russell Midcap, which is its closest comp, but it also outperforms the S&P 500 and a bunch of other indices over almost any period that you pick, 1, 3, 5, 10 years. But the most fascinating thing is that if you exclude the larger companies, so exclude the companies that are more exposed to outside of Texas, international, et cetera, and you focus on the real small and mid-cap components of the index, the more Texas you are, the more you outperform. So it's great when the data backs up the intuition of, hey, the more you're doing business in this state versus others, the better off you are. And it's always good to see that the facts actually support that opinion.
I can only imagine if HEB and Buc-ee's were publicly traded, those numbers would be through the roof. Very good. Jeffrey?
Well, to say that I know you are tight on schedule, so we really appreciate the time. Any last words about how you're going to make sure that Texas dominates the venture world in the future?
Venture world is not like any other business. Texas Capital is not just where we do business; it's also how we do business. We believe that banking is a relationship business, and the value of the network and the value of connectivity is very high. And we look forward to being a value partner to our clients and folks that are interested in doing business in Texas.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bob is my favorite entrepreneur. I've known him since the 1990s. He's been a pioneer, and I haven't verified this, but I'm pretty sure he's founded the largest number of companies in the state of Texas. Unbelievable exits on the transitions, and is now running a new venture. But the main thing he was going to talk about is the think different, because his success was always when some other investor or some other entrepreneur was thinking one way, he thought different. And the success says it all. Number one, the past, present, and where the future is going of venture in Texas. You did companies. You actually had a venture firm back in the 90s. You were there with Austin Ventures. Number one, what drove your success? Why were you so passionate about businesses? And where do you see Texas going in the future?
Well, see what drove my success or my businesses. It's probably a longer story. I've always been a contrarian. I think that's where it starts. And I've always been criticized for the ideas I have. When everybody wants to go on the left, I said, no, I think we should go right. And they'd say, that's silly, or that's dumb, or that's not what everybody does. And I'd say, that's okay. That's what I'm going to do. And so repeatedly, it's the approach I've taken, sometimes faced with great resistance. In fact, always faced with great resistance. And they don't always work out because luck counts for a lot. You can do a whole lot of things right, have the right financial support, the right team, and still the businesses still don't thrive. But the truth is that I have focused on really disrupting industries. So today, for example, I'm in the middle of starting a crypto hedge fund. There'll be lots of people who go, oh, crypto. No, we love crypto. Every day when it's up and down, we're making money. And so 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to go build an automated trading system. Now, I have 2 computer science degrees amongst others, but I haven't programmed in 35 years. I've run companies. The last one was 800 people, $100 million. And here I am now trying to learn quant and Python and this and that. Well, what emerged out of that was a different way to think about quant. When everybody on Wall Street's thinking about a mean regression and smoothing algorithms, I said, what if we could build a brain that thought? I actually had a quant guy quit because he thought I was crazy. Seriously. Well, that's what we did. We built a brain that thought. It's all AI ML based. And literally it's crushing the best funds out there right now. And so we're just out raising our first fund, but it was to have the courage to just pursue something that was different. Who would have thought to start the starting point of a brain and then have the brain become increasingly more intelligent as it moved through time and adjust dynamically to the market movements, as opposed to hoping that your formula or your static machine learning model was going to adequately represent it. And so that's an example, but it's been the case since, when I started Tivoli. I've told people, if I had $1 million for every time someone said, you're nuts to do this, you can't compete with IBM and HP and Sun and all these companies. This little company in Austin, Texas is never going to do it. I wouldn't have ever needed a liquidity event to have made money. But that was, again, one of these things where, what if you could model an entire complex network of computers and all the resources on it as a single computer? That was the idea. Everybody thought that was nuts. And then all of a sudden, Kleiner Perkins came in and funded it. And the rest was history. So, I just think that I was just speaking to a woman today, and she was asking about entrepreneurship and how she might start a business, but it'd be safe. And I said, well, safe doesn't go with entrepreneurship. You're starting from the wrong mental energy. You have to just jump in and do it. And so I promote those that have the courage to think differently, and that's really the essence of everything I've done.
So Texas has the ETF now, the first state ETF, and now he's working on the future of how we're going to trade with cryptocurrencies. But our goal is to have him heavily involved with what's happening in Texas. He's a busy man, but is there anything else you want to tell entrepreneurs? I mean, realizing that you have a passion for entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, especially on starting businesses. The key is you have to get out there. You have to take the risk.
Maybe advice to a young guy with a podcast.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to tell you no, or you can't do something, or it's not right, or why are you doing that? And it's an artful balance of knowing when to give up versus when to continue to pursue. But the truth is that most of the people that have the tenacity and the determination to just keep at something and do it with smart people will ultimately end up successful. Again, with luck as the backdrop to all of it. And I just think that, you got to get up every day. My daughter said to me after she got done with college, Dad, I'd like to start a business, but I'm afraid to do it. How did you do it? I said, I didn't know anything about it either, but I got up every day and I just did it. And I got knocked down and I got back up. And when I started Tivoli in Austin, it was the first venture-backed enterprise software company. So there was no ecosystem. But the point is that I didn't have anybody to consult with. I was like banging around in the dark daily, and it was pure instinct. And I did lots of things wrong as a young kid, but ultimately there were lots of things that got done right. And you just gotta be determined and believe and know that it'll be okay if you just keep working hard.
Now we're going to bring up venture capital. Morgan Flager basically runs Silverton. It's the most successful, or what I'd say the largest. He's going to say that. No, don't say that. But I think it's the largest, most successful venture capital firm in Texas. I've known them since the very beginning because the first venture capitalist I ever had was the founder, along with Morgan, on that firm. Very successful, and excited to hear some of the words that he has to share. And the gentleman right next to me, Joe Milam, is establishing the Texas Legacy Fund. So rather than trying to steal any thunder, I'll have him talk about why do we need a Texas Legacy Fund, what it is, and why is it going to make Texas the most powerful investor in the country.
Yeah, and my buddy Matt Reibling here, and involved in commercial real estate ventures, and many different things. We'll let him kind of touch on what they're focusing on at Texan. You want to start it off, Matt? What brings you here? What Texan's up to? YTexas?
Very fond of what YTexas is becoming and what Ed Curtis and Michelle and everybody who's taken part in this have built. So I've been a supporter, and of course, you say I roped you in, but I think you graciously joined us. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Like he mentioned, coming from real estate, commercial real estate, land development, all the way through to almost practically every asset class. We were in 15 countries around the world in some of our businesses. In that process, I found a lot of issues with our operations, and I think everybody sees this day to day in commercial real estate. So at some point, when valuations get frothy, you say to yourself, well, how can I improve the NOI? So venture, right? How does in real estate get to venture? That never happens. So preservation of capital doesn't take that type of risk typically, but I saw a lot of opportunity in it. So Icon was my first investment, and it's a company that we were very fond of, and they're growing immensely. And if it affects essentially anything on the asset level, or if it's affecting the community or the infrastructure, we're interested in it. We're very keen on water innovations at the moment as well as construction technology, or there's numerous companies that we've invested in, including things like LiDAR for autonomous vehicles. So it's a fascinating line of work, and it's one step at a time, and I'm encouraging everyone out there to take that view, because at the same time, this is the future, and we need to start capitalizing on it. And of course, Texas is growing very well into that boot, so to say. So.
Yeah, so Icon, Austin-based company, 3D printing, 100 home development just north of Austin. I think they have homes completed for sale, wrapping up the project here. So exciting times in the innovation portion of construction, which doesn't happen very often. Not a lot of disruption over the last 100 years.
soon to be printing on the moon, right?
That's what they say.
So realizing that Texas is first in so many things, we're first in venture capital, right, Joe?
Yeah, it's not hard to understand the tailwind that Texas's economy has and why Texas. But if you really drill down and look at where Texas's funding ecosystem is relative to the opportunity set, both that's historically been available, but also certainly what's in front of us, it's a bit anemic and quite frankly pathetic. All due respect, Morgan, I think you already know this yourself. Texas got, according to many reports, we're fifth in the country in the total venture dollars that went to startups. And it's hard to have those numbers perfectly accurate, but the data is, relatively speaking, it's accurate. But when you normalize those dollars for the size of Texas's economy, we're 20th in the country behind states like Wyoming and Delaware, New Hampshire. When you look at how much more they're mobilizing in local startups, given the size of their economy and the wealth in that economy. So Texas is punching way below its weight. Why? Well, there's a whole number of reasons as to why. One of the sad statistics is also that when you look at the top 30 universities in the world where venture funding is supporting their students, both undergraduates, graduates, and MBA type students, UT is the only Texas university on the top 30, but we're also punching way below our weight there as well, with universities like Northwestern, a marketing school for crying out loud, and then Duke and Cornell and much smaller universities, which in much smaller communities that are getting orders of magnitude. So if we are to mobilize money just for Texas to be fifth in both absolute dollars, but relative to the size of our economy, would have to triple the amount of money supporting startups per year. And if we really punched at least at our weight, we're the second largest economy in the United States. That means you're talking about a factor of 5 or 6x. Now that's institutional scale investing. And that's what needs to happen going forward. To mobilize real money, you've got to do it in a way that where lessons can be borrowed and applied from both what's been learned in Texas venture capital world and Silicon Valley over 70 years, but also the lessons learned in the public market investing, where serious money gets allocated at scale. And that's what the future of venture capital is going to start looking like, at least in Texas, if we have anything to do about it.
Fantastic. So lots of things that can be done. Lots of leadership, and especially being pulled together by YTexas to make it happen. So Morgan, I mean, first of all, I'm a fan of Silverton LP, a limited partner in the fund, but unbelievable performance. What I like about Morgan personally and what he's done at the fund is he runs it like a Texas company. So before Silicon Valley even thought about refactoring their portfolio, he pulled us into a meeting that was 2 years ago? 2 years ago, and said, "Hey, we have some news for you. We have to refactor. We have to lower, the portfolio." That's leadership, and that was not being done in Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of things that are done right, but the other thing is I was surprised to find out that there's some limitations of where capital comes into Silverton. So I'd love to, who are the biggest investors, your anchors in Silverton, and who should they be, or who could they be, knowing some names?
I agree with Joe in the sense that there's a lot more for us to accomplish on the technology side within Texas, and that starts with funding. Companies have to get the capital in order to grow, in order to put Texas on the map. We're number 4 or 5, as Joe represented, that's way below kind of our weight class. It's still, in terms of venture dollars in the state, 10x what it was when I came down here about 18 years ago. So we are making progress. It's just not as big and fast as I think everyone would like. And it's super important, venture job growth. So companies that have taken venture capital over the past 30 years have grown jobs about 960%. The rest of the public sector indexed over the same time period is about 40%. So technology and job growth are probably what's going to lead us out of the funk that we're in right now. So it is important to the economy. And so your question was, hey, who are the investors in Silverton and who should they be? So, when I started raising money for the fund about 15 years ago, all of our investment was from out of state. We did talk to a few institutions. Texas actually has quite a bit of institutional capital, TRS, UTIMCO, et cetera, et cetera. Couldn't get that done. I don't kind of put that on them. I think we're a pretty unknown quantity at that point in time. Hadn't kind of put up the numbers that we put up over the past kind of 15 to 20 years. That's changed a bit. So I think if everyone within the state, including the allocators, agree of how important it is for us to lead the way in this area, there are things we can do to structurally kind of put our money where our mouth is and kind of get behind it. And I do think we have some GPs, general partners, some funds within the state of Texas that are world-class fund managers that could probably benefit from some more support from the institutions within the state of Texas, kind of help our own sort of mentality. I don't think we need it. Like, we're perfectly happy to go and take money from New York and Boston and all the places we're trying to catch up to or beat from a technology investment standpoint. But it just seems like if we could band to get together a bit more within Texas, we could get more done faster.
Fantastic. And really, to his credit, when he came in, that was after the .com bust and after Austin Ventures and Seven Rosen stopped investing in Texas. So what has happened with Silverton over the last, you said 18 years, is staggering. I mean, it really, it was definitely above its weight class in its performance. But this is the type of leadership that can really take us to the next level. And this whole group is going to be the ones that really solve the complex issues around venture capital and put us in the lead.
Just one more thing, we're an early stage venture capital manager. So we're investing typically in companies that have less than $1 million in revenue. There is an entire spectrum of capital providers out there. And Texas, for the large part, just has those early stage managers. So we're looking to California and New York for those growth rounds of investment as well. And again, I think our ecosystem has grown to the point where there are probably some homegrown managers and capital allocation that needs to take place where we're supporting our companies at a growth stage as well. That isn't necessarily what Silverton is set up to do, but there's certainly people out there that could serve that role within the community.
Any other last comments? Joe?
Yeah, again, Morgan framed it perfectly. And if you look at Texas and if referencing Austin or Dallas or Houston in there, but Austin has certainly been the leader in Texas. Houston is punching way below their weight relative to Texas punching below its weight. So there's a lot of other communities that need to step up. Austin absolutely has been a leader, and Jeff is absolutely right. So Silverton's been one of the best in town. But as he pointed out, the breadth from early to seed A to growth and the depth in Austin and in Texas needs to raise its game. It just needs to raise its game. We need to have better breadth and depth. There's no shortage of capital. There's no shortage of opportunity. Texas looks a lot like, having studied the venture industry and entrepreneurism going back a long time, Texas looks just like Silicon Valley in 1983. If you go back and understand what happened in the venture industry after the ERISA laws changed, a lot more funds showed up and then innovation followed. That is the equation. Innovation follows the money for a whole myriad of reasons. And the opportunity that just blossomed in the 80s and 90s and beyond is because the ERISA laws stimulated more money from the institutional fiduciary-led pools of money into this nascent asset class. Well, we need to have our own 83 moment here in Texas, and I think that's happening right now.
And to make a perfect transition to the next group that we're going to pull up, I'm going to ask Matt. Matt, what does infrastructure have to do with venture and technology?
Well, I mean, that's a pretty broad but very granular question. So let me couple on what Joe just mentioned as well. I mean, completing that circle of capital is something that Texas 100% ought to do. I was just in Calgary for the Alberta Innovates conference, where Calgary, much like Texas, is kind of lacking in that later stage fundraising. They can get things to Series A and possibly B very simply, but then after that, everyone else looks outside the country to find that next tranche of capital that they need to grow. And I think in Texas, we have that similar problem. So I think almost every unicorn I've found here in Texas has gone outside the state very simply to find the $100+ million checks. And that's a problem. So we should keep that more in house. And I think infrastructure on a granular level, there's a lot of technologies out there that can like complete that circle and to bring all the different autonomous situations we need to have fall in place and in sync with our, not just roadways, but in the air as well, as there's a multitude of reasons why autonomy works, and autonomy is a larger concept than just robots moving on their own, or cars driving down the road in a fashion without a driver. So the technology is where we need to source those technologies. They might not all be in Texas. A lot of unicorns that I've personally found have been in Texas or elsewhere, but you need to go out there and get on the ground and source these things, and then bring them here, couple them together, and form the type of units that we need to complete that.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to a lot of big moves in the state of Texas on the venture capital side very soon, and look forward to the Texas Legacy Fund. Now we're going to bring up William T. Nolan and Ted Miller coming up to talk about the other side of innovation requires infrastructure. And we brought in the experts. In fact, the expert he lives in New York, but has been basically championing for 6 years House Bill 490, which is all about establishing a federal infrastructure bank. And the gentleman next to me, Ted Miller, we've been working together for, I think, almost 7 years. We first got together realizing that he was the founder of Crown Castle. But there's an incredible story he can tell us about why we have to change our way of actually doing innovation capital and how important infrastructure is.
Very good. Welcome, T and Ted, to Texas.
Thank you very much. I live in New York, and it's very refreshing to come to the state of Texas, I can tell you. So, because everything in the state of Texas is go, everything almost in the state of New York is stop. So it's delightful to be here. We're in the process of establishing the Federal Infrastructure Bank to finance U.S. infrastructure. There is a tremendous need. There's about a $3 trillion shortfall, about $300 billion a year is shortfall in U.S. infrastructure. And so we're in the process of establishing this bank to finance it and finance that shortfall. It'll be a privately owned, privately managed, privately funded infrastructure bank, just like the Federal Reserve, the Federal Home Loan Bank, and the Farm Credit System. And when I tell people in Congress, congressmen and senators, those three are the three pillars of the U.S. economy, and they're all privately owned, privately managed, and privately funded. And some of them say, really? So this will be in that vein, and that's why we have the best banking system, the best agriculture, and the best housing and housing finance in the world. So one of the principal functions and I'll turn it over to Ted, because he's an entrepreneur that has been hugely successful, and we would love to finance operations and projects like his. But one of the principal things that the infrastructure bank will bring liquidity to the infrastructure finance market. Infrastructure is not a liquid market. The muni bond market is not a liquid market. It's successful, don't get me wrong, but it's all retail. It's all ultimately retail. People buy it for the tax benefits, and then they hold them either in the funds or individually or whatnot. So they're locked away for 7 to 10 years until there's a recall or whatnot. The same thing with infrastructure funds that are privately managed by private equity funds and whatnot. Usually the lockup period is 7 to 10 years. So there's not much liquidity. Now, Goldman and a few other firms are trying to be a secondary market in infrastructure investments, primarily from private equity funds. But it's an illiquid market. The banks, there are only a few banks that do infrastructure structured finance, like JP Morgan and whatnot, and they're very, very good. So the purpose of the bank, the Federal Infrastructure Bank, is to provide liquidity. We will be issuing infrastructure bonds. There's no market for infrastructure bonds today. When the Federal Reserve said we want to buy U.S., anything, corporate bonds, whatever, they could not buy infrastructure bonds because they can't go to a muni bond fund and say we want to buy $1 billion of munis. They said, I'm sorry, we can't sell you. We can sell you 10 million. You know? So there's no liquidity in the market, but the size of the market will be in the trillions, but it'll take a while. It'll take a bank to help create that market, to issue bonds that investors want to have, that'll be liquid, that'll be of quality and depth of market and tradability that every investor looks for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ted.
Well, let's start. So Ted has a fascinating story about, so infrastructure and innovation capital rarely ever meet. And he had a situation back at the beginning of what ended up being a pretty small company. But yeah, tell a story about Crown Castle and why you're so passionate about what's coming together here in Texas.
Okay, so I just want to say that what T's doing is incredible. And when it comes to pass, it will be a game changer for the infrastructure industry, which needs technology, and technology needs infrastructure. So kudos. I formed a company called Crown Castle in 1994, which basically took communications infrastructure communication towers, and made them an investable asset class. We took Crown Castle public in 1998, but in the interim, I had to find some money because investing in infrastructure costs millions and billions of dollars. So I found a private equity venture capital firm. It wasn't, the delineation back then wasn't like it is today. I mean, I wouldn't have even been able to get venture capital money because I didn't have $1 million in revenue or cash flow, whatever the metric might be. But I found a private equity firm that understood and invested in telecommunications technology, understood mobile phones and mobile technology and so forth, and married them with an infrastructure investor. So the technology investor was in Denver. The infrastructure investor was out of Boston. And when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about railroads, but they understood railroads. They understood contracted revenue. And the technology guys in Denver understood they needed infrastructure. So we married the two, which was a little bit by happen chance and luck. But we got started. And when the market broke, I was going to the big telecommunication companies, Verizon, then Bell Atlantic, Bell South, etc., saying, "Look, guys, I'll buy your infrastructure, your towers, sitting on your balance sheets for billions of dollars, not returning any shareholder value at all." And they had just spent money on 3G spectrum. They were spending money on new technology, antennas, etc., and they were having to build their towers, and their balance sheets were totally stressed. And that's what's happened today with 5G. It's in exactly the same situation. So what we're doing, what Jeff and I have been working on, along with a plethora of other people, is to bring intelligent infrastructure, not dumb infrastructure, just a tower out in the field that you hang some antennas off of and you run some power out there. This is intelligent infrastructure that can accommodate any manner of technology for traffic control, autonomous cars, autonomous air vehicles, and also obviously just voice and data, but also with edge compute, because 5G does not work unless you have edge compute. It works, but you don't get the full value out of 5G. So anyway, the discussion here is, I think, very poignant in that technology has to come together with infrastructure in order to make a perfect marriage. And this guy is going to bring, and a lot of others here are going to bring the right capital, and the technology will come along because they've got to have the infrastructure in which to deploy.
Fascinating. So you have T, putting together what will eventually, the goal within 6 years is for $1 trillion of private capital to be mobilized for infrastructure. And then all this new build out that will, address the critical issues. There's not a single mayor, state governor, or federal leader that does not recognize that broadband for all is a thing. We don't have broadband for all, not even in the state of Texas, which is leading in a lot of ways. And all these new type of safety services and technologies all requires a new infrastructure. But what gave you the confidence when at the same time you were trying to start Crown Castle, you had McKinsey say that there was only going to be a couple thousand cell towers, so there wasn't even a market there. So,
well, I don't know who it was earlier said, well, if you're an entrepreneur, you just have to get up every day and keep plugging along. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to be a contrarian, and a lot of people said no. Even the private equity firms that I ended up dealing with said no for a while until I got them convinced. So I don't know. We have a perfect storm right now, I think, with the telecommunication companies because, as I said a moment ago, they're in the same position they were in 1994, 95, 96. I'll give you an example. Verizon has spent $48 billion on 5G spectrum. They've spent more billions on the use cases for that spectrum. They've now shut down those use cases because their balance sheets are stressed. They're going to outside infrastructure providers to build their fiber. AT&T has teamed up with Blackstone. Verizon's teamed up with a tower company to build their towers. And it can't continue because they have stopped 5G build out for the most part, relatively speaking. In order to get 5G built out, they need to outsource infrastructure in a big way and focus on how they're going to use that $48 billion in spectrum and all the use cases that surround them.
And it's all going to start here in Texas. And thanks to people like the leadership from Ted, but even more important is the mobilization of the private capital from T. Nolan. So T, you like Texas. So why Texas? And what does your wife say about Texas when you said...
I'll tell you what my wife said last night. This was extraordinary. I said, I love Texas. I've been down here, for 3 days, and everybody is so positive and welcoming and whatnot. It's just not like New York or New York City. And I said, we should sell our house and move. But I said, you can't sell your house in New York today, blah, blah, blah. She said, rent it. That's what my wife said. She said, so, and I kid you not, and she is the master of the one line. So that's, so that's what I feel like about Texas. And, if we can do our job and provide the capital to people like Ted, with the opportunities that are here, then this country will boom again, and the state of Texas will take the lead because somebody has to provide the leadership, and the state of Texas can do that. Somebody has to lead. Now, there'll be a lot of resistance because, people who are failing don't like success. They don't like to compare themselves against success, but it's going to happen, and there'll be enough use cases that we can point to. We've got some fabulous use cases that can be done all throughout the country. And this is what we want to finance. And the marriage of technology and infrastructure is the most attractive. Why? It's to a lender, to an investor, because there is revenue. There are multiple revenue sources. Whereas with a bridge, if you're lucky, you have a toll. But with an intelligent highway or a smart highway or a corridor, you can have multiple revenue sources. And that's what an investor and lender looks for. So that's what's important. You have to look for all these different avenues to generate cash, and that's what Ted can do with the PINs, the public infrastructure network nodes, and those things are going to be deployed around the country, and that's the kind of thing that we want to finance because they'll have multiple revenue sources. So there's just tremendous opportunity.
And T, you mentioned to me earlier, for every one job in infrastructure, you've got to spin off of 5 other jobs. So if we can get that going here in the state of Texas, we can get State Highway 130 moving with TxDOT and at least one of the big carriers. we will have a playbook to lead with.
We're gonna have a hard time shutting LaPena off when he starts, but he is very passionate and has an incredible story to tell, and one that he's going to execute here in the state of Texas.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Where do I start?
Well, first tell us, give us the background. Give us who is Mark LaPena and what is the company?
Well, my background is in aviation and data science. Worked actually for ExxonMobil for 14 years, and then got out of that game and got into aviation and data science on a more permanent basis. And started a company originally focused around commercial and general aviation flight tracking. And that kind of morphed into Zenesis, which is, a company that is going to, empower the connection of 1 billion people at the scale of humanity. We're currently right now we're in Florida, and we're actually relocating the whole company here to Texas. So, yeah, Texas. And the reason we decided to do that was really focused around, quite frankly, Jeff, you met me where I was, and you met our company where we were, and you gave us a reason. You gave us an entire community. Nothing like this ever happened for us in Florida. And so, when you said earlier that, innovation follows the money, this is a prime example. We just qualified for $1 billion in Community Reconnect program money from the FCC and Department of Interior through the Community Reconnect program. And our partner company has already got 1.5 million subscribers here in Texas. So we're going to be the backbone architecture for SH-130, and our hat's in the ring.
And not only that is, everything from broadband in rural communities, even border security. He has an incredible TED Talk out on YouTube that I recommend everybody watch.
You're the one that watched it, right?
Yeah, I watched it
over and over again.
Yeah, I think you watched it like 16 times. I only have 17 views, so we know who's watching it. Thank you.
It's a great talk, but we're just excited to have him leading the way. His technology is going to affect the world, but he's going to start here in the state of Texas. So he's done an incredible amount of work to put together a plan, not only for the border, but also for how can, what I say, fiber in the sky, provide a backbone across the entire state.
Yeah, I mean, our technology really is focused around, our North Star has always been lowering the cost per bit for data transport. So to put it in numbers that are just really easy to understand, the average telecommunications company pays about $1 to about $2 per gigabyte for data transport, and our fully triple net fixed cost is under 20 cents. So Starlink, nobody can compete with us on a head-to-head basis, maybe on a war chest basis, but we're not going head-to-head. We're a backbone architecture, so we're not going after retail service yet.
So I know we had limited time, but I want to get everybody a huge thanks to Glenn, because I believe that Glenn needs to continue this job full time. If you haven't seen Boom ATX, follow Boom ATX, and hopefully it's going to be Boom Texas.
Boom. Why Boom Texas? There you go. No, that's great to hear. Obviously we've heard Californian and New York companies moving to Texas, but Florida is not one you hear every day, but definitely YTexas. It's across the country. Everybody's hearing it.
I bought the boots to prove it.
We got the boots to prove it. All right. Well, thank you, YTexas. Thanks, Ed, for having us. Great discussion, venture capital, entrepreneurship, YTexas, because Texas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you all.